15 years later, the 2025 NHL Draft is finally over, and today, with every single class officially done, I wanted to go through every single NHL team and grade their draft classes from worst to best. So, which teams in this 2025 class do I think ultimately did the best and worst in this class? Who was I surprised by the most? Which were the biggest steals of the class? Well, we're going to be breaking all those different aspects down, so make sure you watch till the end for all the prospect talk, and hit that subscribe button if you're new for more hockey content just like this all throughout the year. Now, how today's going to work is that we're going to go through the teams that I think did the worst in this year's draft, and then work our way to the teams that I think did the best. And it's unfortunate because I don't think any team did horribly in this year's class, but at number 32, I have the Tampa Bay Lightning. Pretty easily, to me, the most maybe disappointing draft class. The only player that I see being an NHLer long term is Ethan Zada, and as you guys know, he's a pretty big favorite of mine for the style of game he plays, but I don't see quite enough skill and especially pace in his game to be anything more than just a solid fourth line center. I think he will be able to play some games, but I don't think it's going to be all too impressive besides that. You got Benjamin Rantanen, who's a 20-year-old player in Finland, doing okay for himself, but I also don't see clear NHL upside. Aiden Foster is a ton of fun with his physicality, but besides that, I also don't see a lot of offense in him. 20 points this last year for Prince George. A lot of penalty minutes, as you guys can see, so a lot of fighting and physicality, but not much there. Caleb Peel is a interesting one, 6'2", 196-pound goaltender, overager, and was okay in the USHL this last year for Madison, but also is an overager, and especially at that point, it's just kind of a whatever pick, especially in the 7th round. I look at Zada and I see a potential NHLer, so that shows you that there's no class that I think is horrible in this year's draft, but in Tampa Bay's case, I still think they left quite a bit of actual talent on the table for a team that doesn't have a lot coming up in their pool. I'll say this too, Tampa's pretty stacked at the center position at the NHL level for themselves, and pretty much every single forward they selected was a centerman. Again, I think Zada will be solid, but that's crowding that position up quite a bit. Just not a lot of depth, not a lot of spread that I think makes sense for Tampa Bay either, so they come in the last place spot. Now, moving on to number 31, this is a great example of how much it jumps in the quality between Tampa and this next team, because I don't think this team had a horrible draft or anything. I just think for them, there was some value that I think they kind of left on the board, and that is the Pittsburgh Penguins. A lot of draft picks, as you guys can see, but only a few of them that I think will actually turn out to be anything. The big theme, I think, for Pittsburgh's draft class that kind of left me a little bit disappointed is that they went for a lot of projectable players that I don't see as really NHLers in the future over more high-skill, high-potential players, especially in a class where I think Pittsburgh really needed to turn over their prospect pool. They did an okay job, but not amazing in my opinion. Ben Kindle, of course, is maybe the exception to that rule, drafting at 11th overall, high pace, high motor to his game, and even though he is a wing, he can be a center as well. He's played mostly center throughout this year for Calgary. He's a ton of fun though, scored a ton this year for Calgary as well, and even though there is some risk to him, especially as a smaller player that isn't really the best against physical pressure yet, I think he just brings so much offense to the game, so much potential like there, and could be, I think, the only player from this class that is a definitive top 6 piece of the future. Then you go into the next two first rounders. Bill Zanon, I think, is a pretty solid pick at 22nd overall, pretty decent. He's somebody that I think will round out pretty well as an intense, hardworking, forechecking third-line centerman. I have issues over the skating stride and how he's able to actually present himself, especially up the rush, but when the puck is off his stick, I think he just does so much damage that will lead to good in the end. Then you got Will Horkoff, who I think is in a pretty similar range to Zana, where I think he'll likely round out as a bottom 6 center, likely more as a 4th line center behind Zanon going forward, but in Horkoff's case, pretty similar, though I think in Horkoff's case, the physicality, 6'5", he knows how to use that body to create a lot of chaos, and was great at doing so for this year for the University of Michigan. I think he's going to be a solid player, just not a big upside guy, especially at 24th overall. I would have liked to see them get a little bit more creative, but I think Horkoff's still a decent pick. But then you go on to the day 2 selections, and there were a lot of interesting ones to me. First, they went after Peyton Kettles. I thought the trade moving up to get an early 2nd round pick was pretty interesting. Kettles, I'm not the biggest fan of. He played a ton this year for Swift Current, and of course, big size, 6'6", 194 pounds, and pretty young for this draft class as well, with a September birth date. I just don't quite see long-term offense at all in Kettles' game. He plays a super simple, but kind of a game that kind of is detriment to the overall offense on the ice. Kettles, I think, brings a good physical base, but nothing much more than that. I think a little bit early for 39th overall, mostly tops out as a depth defenseman, but we'll just have to wait and see on that. Then for the rest of the picks, Charlie Trethewey, good skating base, but a lot of question marks outside of that. Gabriel Daigle, I mean, I don't even know how this guy got drafted in the first 3 rounds. I gotta be honest. Big guy, and if you play NHL video games, then obviously he looks pretty good, but he's just not, to me, a worthy goaltender, especially with what they passed up on some of the quality guys that got drafted afterwards. I just don't quite see it personally. You got Brady Peddle, who brings some decent physical characteristics, but also, again, isn't quite much of an upside guy to me. Travis Hayes, who's a nice little grinder, but I don't think quite has the bulk to be able to win NHL minutes for his size especially. I will say, one pick I did like in the later rounds was Quinn Bouchane, who at especially 148th overall is just a solid selection. Not a big defenseman, but plays the game very smart, very compact, knows exactly his strengths and weaknesses, and just goes out there and puts up some pretty good offensive numbers. Not amazing or anything, but 24 points in 49 games last year for Guelph. I thought was pretty solid U18s. So I will say, I like the Kindle pick. I think Zonin and Horkoff will play games. Bouchane I like quite a bit, but the rest of it, especially with how many picks Pittsburgh had, there were just a lot of selections that kind of just are uninspiring to me. And maybe that's just me, we'll have to wait and see, but I think for Pittsburgh, they could have shot for the stars a little bit more often. On to my 30th ranked prospect pool, we go on to the Vegas Golden Knights, and they're a team that, like many years, doesn't have a lot to work with, but I thought they did okay with it. The big pick, of course, is getting Jacob Wozniak at 55th overall, which I think is pretty good value. He was a first-round ranked guy for me, but obviously more in the 30s range. Still, though, I think as a goal scorer, as somebody that especially got a lot stronger throughout the course of the season, using his body a lot more too, I think he could become a decent middle six power play sniper for the future. So in that range, I think the Vegas Golden Knights will take that quite a bit. The only other pick that I think could maybe even come close to an NHL impact is Mateo Neubert coming out of the QMJHL. One of the younger players in this class, put up some pretty solid numbers, though of course around some pretty good players there with the Armada. 67 points in 57 games. He's worth taking a bet on. I think he's pretty smart with the way he plays, but isn't really much of a driven player himself, doesn't really create too much by himself. So we'll see what ends up happening there, but I think Ice Wozniak is really the prize of this. But still, for the draft class, I'm going to give them a straight C. It was decent. It was all right. Not a lot of picks to work with, but Ice Wozniak is pretty solid. On to the next selection. This is where I have the Colorado Avalanche. Like the Vegas Golden Knights, not a lot of picks to work from, but considering they only had 3 picks in this year's draft, I think they got some decent value out of it. Their first pick in the 3rd round, Francisco De Leche, one of the more underrated overagers, I would say, a 20-year-old playing for UMass, but you see, he kind of like a Charlie Serrato, comes from a junior league where he got some attention but wasn't enough to get drafted, then comes in the NCAA as a freshman and just absolutely destroys things. For UMass as a D-man, 24 points in 40 games, he was exceptional for them, has really been able to rise his game over the past couple of years, so I think he's worth a bet, maybe a little bit earlier than I would have taken him, but still, I mean, around that range, I think it's explainable. Then, of course, you got Linus Funk as a 6'3" defenseman. With that name, why not, especially in the 4th round? And I also do like the Nolan Road pick a lot in the 7th. He's also another overager, so keep that as a theme, but he was exceptional for Tri-City last year in the USHL. Like, people don't quite realize, scoring in the USHL is quite hard, so to even be around a point per game, if not better, is pretty great, even if he is an overager. In Rhodes' case, I just think he's really good against physical pressure. Even though he is a smaller forward, 5'11" center, he's just really strong on his skates. I think he has a good base, and so you could see what happens in the 7th round. Not likely to be an NHLer, but at that range, I think he projects pretty well. But De Leche, I think, is the best pick out of the bunch, and considering the Avs only got 3 picks, I think the value they got in all 3 of them was solid across the board. Now, we were going from the teams that got a C rank to now the only team in the league that I think rated a C+ when it comes to this draft, and that is the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, Toronto had a ton of picks, especially after the 4th round, and it's interesting to see how this draft went for them. First, with the last pick in the 2nd round, they went after Tinus Luke Koblar, who is a fascinating project. 6'3" Norwegian wing, big size, really lanky though, and really needs to fill out that frame. Not really the greatest numbers in the Junior 20 this year or at the U18 World Juniors. He, to me, is one of the rawest players you can even think to draft in this range. We'll see what happens. There is a nice base to work on there, but definitely not what I would have done at 64th overall, I'll just say that. But I think the next 3 picks after that were actually pretty good value all around. Tyler Hopkins from the Kingston Frontenacs at 86th overall. Think your Fraser Minton type of pick here. Super responsible, smart center down the middle, who rarely makes too many mistakes. This year for the Kingston, he got 51 points in 67 games. Overall, I think we'll maybe you hop around into a 4th line center at best, but I think, again, with those habits, will likely lead to a pretty good pro player and a great Marley one day. But I liked the 2 5th-round picks they made. First, William Bell, who they got out of the NTDP, somebody playing for Notre Dame this next year. He is just bang and crash, simple with his physical game. He wants to terrorize opponents, make big hits with his skating stride and his especially strength around the boards. He can be so much fun to watch out there. I don't think he has much offensive potential, but that boy bangs and crashes and does a pretty good job at it. And then you got Harry Nancy, who I actually really like in this range at 153rd, 6'3", 185 pounds, really big size, but more of a playmaker. And here's the thing. Didn't get great production this last year, but as you can see, a September date, so one of the youngest players in this draft class, and it's not going to blow you away, the 16 assists, 23 points in 67 games, but I think he was driving a lot of good results for Owen Sound, just not a lot of it was really getting taken advantage of, wasn't getting a ton of ice time either. In Nancy's case, I think he's due for a breakout season next year, and in the 5th round, it's solid value. C+ for the Leafs, they did quite well. Not exceptional, but solid. Now we get into the mountain of teams that I think had a B- draft. And let's start out with the New Jersey Devils, who also didn't have a ton of quality to work with, but a decent amount of quantity. I think they did quite decently in the middle rounds. In terms of the players they brought on, first up was Conrad Fonderk. Not somebody I would have drafted over Cole McKinney, but I think Fonderk could become a decent physical 4th line center in the future. He's somebody that actually brings some pretty good skill, especially against pressure. Not sure how much there is offensively outside of that, but going to BU, he should be an interesting project to take on. Benjamin Keevan, I thought was a great pick at 63. So much speed, so much intensity up the rush. He just wants to make major offensive game-breaking plays. There is some invincibility when it comes to his game, sometimes where he kind of comes and goes, but when he is on his game, he's brilliant. And this last year, fantastic production. I mean, in the USHL, great numbers. I love to see that out of him. Then you also got Mason Moe, 90th overall. He was kind of an underrated one in this class for me too, kind of like a Fonderk actually, though I would say Moe is more of a physical presence and decidedly so this last year in the USHL. He's somebody that I think goes a little bit under the radar, but has some good physical traits to him up the middle too. Trenton Bennett, I don't think is an NHLer, but I just wanted to mention him because he's a fascinating draftee, especially in the 4th round in the top 100. 6'8", 205 pounds as a OHL overager. But you guys can see he's been playing in the CCHL mostly, then had like 6 games for Owen Sound in the OHL this year and got a .923 save percentage. I mean, why the heck not? A lot earlier than I would have selected somebody like him, but I mean, 6'8", put up some good numbers. Why not at that rate? Gustav Hillstrom, I absolutely adored at 114th overall. Great penalty killer, uses his body exceptionally well to create defensive turnovers and to really survey the ice well. I just think he plays as a future 4th line center so exceptionally. It might play a similar role to Fonderk when it's all said and done, but if the Devils really want to target that 4th line center role, they've cornered the market quite a bit. I like him quite a bit though, especially after the top 100. And I did want to give a shout out to David Roosevelt, a bigger Czech guy. In the 6th round especially, I think he has some pretty good pro habits. I don't know how high he's going to get out in the lineup, but this guy can work his tail off, and in the 6th round, I think it's a solid pick. On to the Minnesota Wild, another team in this B- range. They didn't really have too many picks to work with, but I thought they took actually some pretty interesting swings with the ones they did. There's 3 picks in this class that get me particularly excited. Theodore Hallquist is one heck of a swing inside the top 55, but I don't mind it too much. 6'2" defenseman that is bigger, but has so many good handles, knows how to use the puck movement so well up the ice. It's just a visionary, has a great creativity. We'll see how much there is after that, but I think brings some pretty good traits to the board here for many. Of course, Adam Banach at the 4th round, 102 overall. Banach has been all over the place, but there is still the skill on display on top of the hardworking nature he provides. I think Banach honestly gets underrated in terms of the two-way game that he puts out there. And this guy can do Michigans. He can do so many different things. Super small, but a team like Minnesota taking that risk, I do love to see that. You also got Carter Klippenstein as well in the 4th round. I think he kind of is like a mini Lyndon Lakovich to me, where he's like so big, but he can also use his physicality and use that skill in massive ways, but is extremely raw, really comes and goes, really likes to coast at points. I think if he's able to hone in that physical play, though, really get that going and be able to become a more consistent player, he could maybe become an NHLer, though an interesting base of talent really in this entire draft for Minnesota to build around. On to our next team in the B- range. This is where I have the Seattle Kraken. It's unfortunate because I like a few of the players they drafted here. It was just in weird spots, especially at the top. Really, the only ones that I think are worth talking about are the first 2 picks in their draft, Jake O'Brien and, of course, Blake Fiddler. In O'Brien's case, you guys know, I absolutely adore this guy. One of the best playmakers of this class, the vision, the creativity, it's all at a top-tier level. There will be some concerns over the physical play, how he puts his body out there, and I think he will need to grow, at least when it comes to the muscle, quite a bit, but I have full confidence in that. And if he is a part of that Kraken future and a big part of it, I think he'll succeed wildly. It's just weird, though, that again, they already have Shane Wright, they already have Matty Beniers, they already have Berkeley Ken, who's absolutely sick, by the way. So unless one of those guys maybe transitions onto the wing, I just don't understand this. Maybe they trade one of those guys potentially, that leaves the door open to that, but definitely trying to go for best player available. I understand it, but I think for Seattle, it's kind of getting a little bit ridiculous. I mean, if they go into next year, have a top 10 pick, they're probably just going to draft another center because that's just how they do things, apparently. But then we go on to their second rounder in Blake Fiddler at 36th overall, and this is just great value. At 36, I think Fiddler's going to be great in a dependable physical role, using his stick well, but also has some, I think, offensive upside. Not a crazy amount, but he likes to join the rush, has a good shot from the point, but I think you're looking at probably a 20-25 point physical defenseman here, which is what Seattle needs more of in their pool. It also makes the fact they passed up on Randy Murka, I think, sting a little bit less. I don't really like Seattle's class much after this, but their first 2 picks, great value and 2 great players being added into the pool. Next up, still in the B- tier, let's go on to my favorite team in the Dallas Stars, where they certainly made some pretty big swings. The first 2 picks, though, are the only ones that I think are super worth talking about when it comes to Dallas. First 2, of course, got Cameron Schmidt at 94th overall, which in terms of the raw production looks to be a steal on paper. 40 goals, 78 points in 61 games. For me personally, out of the small guys, the big 3 small guys in Banach, in Mooney, and Schmidt, Schmidt is my least favorite, but you can't deny the goal scoring. The anticipation to play with his goal scoring is high end, and the speed up the ice, especially in transition, is solid. I just have some concerns over how he battles in front of the net and lack of battle thereof in his entire game. He really comes and goes. He's an inconsistent guy, and I feel like there's a lot of people comparing him to the Logan Stankoven of that the Stars drafted, of course, a few years back. Stankoven is a completely different player. Schmidt may be a better goal scorer, better power play guy. Stankoven is just pure dog. I don't quite see that in Schmidt's game, and I think his defensive game needs to improve mightily for him to have a chance, but still an interesting project to take on, and I can't complain about that in, what, the late 3rd round? Might as well take that. Then you got Brandon Gorzinski, who I think is an interesting pick as well in the 4th round. A bigger forward, much bigger from the WHL, playing for the Calgary Hitmen. 6'2", 185 pounds. He's something that has some good physicality, good goal scoring instincts. We'll see how it all gets put together, but I like a project there as a potential 4th liner in the future. That's pretty much it from the Stars case, but again, the high-end potential in Schmidt does leave me curious, especially with how well they developed Logan Stankoven in their own system. Now, we see a pretty big jump in terms of the quality of draft classes here. We're still in the B- tier, but this is where I have the Columbus Blue Jackets, which made some pretty high-end selections. First, you got Jackson Smith, which in terms of the player and potential, there is a lot to go on here. Even though he's a bigger defenseman, doesn't really play the body too much, and defensively has some icky moments, which does leave me questioning his long-term potential. But in terms of the talent, in terms of the playmaking and the creativity in the offensive zone, this guy can absolutely move. He can deke you out of your jock straps. So much fun to watch when he is at his best. We'll just have to wait and see how he fits into that Columbus system, but a lot of potential there to work on. Then at 20th overall, they went for another big surprise, going for Pyotr Andrianov. Now, for me, he's one of my top goaltenders in this class, ranked 2nd along behind Alexei Medvedev, who eventually went to the Canucks. But I like Andrianov quite a bit. Wouldn't have dropped him in the 1st round, I don't think, but wouldn't have been too far outside of it. 6'2", 207 pounds, just so athletic, so charismatic in net. This guy just knows how to battle, how to win, how to get to pucks, how to track them well, and you see in the MHL this last year, 99.42 goals saved percentage in 37 games, great in the playoffs too. Even though I think it's a little bit early for a goalie, if you're going to bet on a goalie, he's not a bad one to bet on. Then we go on to their later selections. You got Malte Vass in the 3rd round. He's a pretty versatile, fluid defenseman for a bigger guy, 6'2". Not a ton of offense in him, but I think just has some pretty good traits to build on. Kind of like maybe a budget Sasha Boumediene, who, of course, went to the Winnipeg Jets. Then you go into Owen Griffin. I like this pick a lot for the Blue Jackets. Late in that 5th round, 5'10", is a smaller center, but this guy was brilliant in the second half of the season for Oshawa. Got 51 points and 22 goals in 62 162 games, and as he got a bigger spot in that lineup, you can see in the playoffs, 21 games, 16 goals, 29 points, was an absolute freak of a playoff performer. So especially in the 5th round, not a bad bet to make. Then I also think that Jeremy Loranga, a pretty interesting selection in the 7th. I mean, smaller center again, like an Owen Griffin, 5'9", 161 pounds, but this guy was unbelievable in the BCHL this year. Commit to University of Nebraska Omaha. He's somebody that I love a ton when it comes to how good he is getting to the net and how dangerous he is with the puck on his stick. As a 7th rounder, it's a crapshoot, but Loranga has some potential that I think Columbus could unlock. Now, we only got a couple teams left in the B- range, I promise, but next up we go on to the Utah Mammoth, who had a pretty good spread of picks in terms of the quantity and quality. Now, of course, the draft is highlighted by Caleb Noye getting him at 4th overall. Even though I'm not quite as high in Noye getting him with a top 5 spot, I still think Noye will be a good fit in that Utah system. Has good traits overall, very balanced skater, and with his vision and creativity up the rush, has a ton of playmaking potential. I still have my concerns over how that two-way game translates, how he's going to be actually battling against physical competition, since I want to see him use that body a little bit more, but still a lot to look forward to there. Then with their other picks, you got Max Pajnika, who, of course, at 6'5", 185 pounds as a pretty balanced skater, you already knew that Utah was going to be after him. I think he could round out okay as a depth defenseman, maybe a 6th guy in your lineup. A little bit earlier than I would have taken him at 46th overall, but let's be honest, this is Utah's bread and butter right here in this guy. I also want to shout out Igor Borikov, who's an overager over in Russia, but a younger one, an August birthday, so you got to factor that in. But in the 4th round, he was stellar in the KHL this last season, going from playing a few games last year to 25 points and 12 goals in 67 games, and really good production as well in the playoffs, 7 goals in 11 games for Dynamo. So we'll see what happens there. I'm not going to guarantee anything, but a decent bet, I think, for Utah to make. Then I also like the bet on Ludwig Jonsson out of Switzerland. He's somebody that, especially as a 6th rounder, I wouldn't have really guessed a Utah pick, since he's a lot more of a smaller defenseman, a lot more of a perimeter guy, a lot more of a skating guy, not much of a defensive player at this stage, but put up some pretty good numbers in the National League. And at the U18s, I didn't really think looked all that out of place. So we'll see. Especially in the 6th round, I like that bet for Utah, who I wouldn't have guessed to select somebody like him. Next up, we move on to the Buffalo Sabres, who I think did pretty well for themselves. You, of course, had that trade involving Connor Timmins, which I think the more I think about it, actually, I don't mind on the Buffalo's end. But in terms of the prospects they got, some pretty good value all around. First, you got Ratty Murka at 9th overall, and this is the dream type of player for the Buffalo Sabres to get. 6'6", 218 pounds, so mobile, so compact in his own zone. There are some times where the rawness kind of comes out to play with his decision-making, but my goodness, when this guy plays at his best, there is so much to like in him, and has such a big development runway. There's so much to tap into, and I think would completely could be a top pair right D if everything does round out well. And especially at 9th overall, I think for Buffalo, even though I don't know if I trust them to develop him well, he's a good project to take on. Then you go on to David Bedkowski, and you know what? Still a bit earlier than I would have selected him, but this guy is just violent. He's just mean. He's out there to kill people. And at 6'5", 220 pounds, I mean, I think he can do that. Do I see any potential at all offensively? No, I'm just going to tell you right now, not at all. I think he'll be a 7th defenseman in the NHL, but kind of like I'm trying to think, like a Matt Rempe on defense. There's not really many comparables for him, but I think he could be in that type of mold. Then I wanted to talk about Noah LeBerge as well, coming out of the QMJHL in the 5th round. I think he's quite an underrated piece coming out of the QMJHL. Very compact but intelligent, mobile blue liner, not the biggest guy in the world, so I think adding a little bit more muscle, especially in his lower body, will be important, but I think could become a decent puck mover on the bottom pair. Kind of a similar guy to a Luke Osborne, who they drafted recently. And I also want to shout out Melvin Novotny. Getting him in the 7th round is pretty good value for this guy. So smart with the way he drives up the ice, but I just love the intensity. I love the passion he plays the game with. This guy's just so much fun. I would have liked a better U18s, and that's maybe why he ended up dropping a bit, but Novotny just has a lot to like there still as a person, as a player, and I think the Sabres got a very interesting project here. Still in the B- range, we go on to the Anaheim Ducks, a team that also, like Buffalo, I think just got good value in a lot of different positions in the draft, and I honestly come to like their class quite a bit. And I don't think people would have expected that I'd like the Ducks draft after how much I've been hating on Roger McQueen as a player. And even though I'll say this, I'm still not in love at 10th overall with McQueen. That's a lot better of a position than I honestly thought he was going to end up. Even if I mocked him to number 10, I was kind of expecting there to be a chance where he goes like as high as 4th overall to Utah. But I think even though I see a clear risks when it comes to the overall game, when it comes to the actual skill set, speed-wise, and how he implements it, and how he actually plays as a unit, on top of course, the injuries that have been a massive contention point this year, the skill set is still radiant, the physical traits are amazing, and there is still a really interesting base to build upon here. So even though I have my problems with him as a player, the talent is overwhelming, and I think this is around the range where it starts to be okay for me to end up taking him. So I don't really have much of a problem with it. I also really like Eric Nielsen, 45th overall. Anaheim just stacking up the centers. It's interesting because Roger McQueen, big guy, big physicality, while Nielsen is 6 foot, but one of the smallest players in this draft in terms of the muscle. He, of course, is going to be going to Michigan State University, where I think he's going to put up a ton of pounds on him. And once he does, the transition ability, the smarts in his game, how compact of a player he is, how smart he is up the ice, I think Nielsen is a steal in the 45 range. And if he does come up to pass, I think is just going to be a brilliant middle six piece for that Ducks team. I did want to mention Lassie Boylis. I mean, he's something that I don't see a ton in. It's kind of just a player that I think they wanted to pick just because they want to give some love to the Finns, even though this draft is really, really bad for Finland. But I think he has some good skill with the puck on his stick as a defenseman. I don't see a ton more outside of that, especially defensively, but we'll just have to wait and see. I do think Drew Schock has a little bit to him in terms of the physical game and how he presents himself out there. He's much more of a defenseman that plays like a 6'5" guy rather than actually being 6'5", as you guys can see, 6 foot, 179 pounds. But I think the base is good there, and I think especially with him up the ice, he has some good moments to him, some really good moments. So we'll see out of him. But another lefty to add to the system. We'll see if he actually plays, considering how absolutely stacked the left side of the defense is for Anaheim. We'll just have to wait and see on that. Elijah Neuenschwander as a 4th rounder in the tail end of my top 10 goalies in this year's class, but was 10th overall. Even though there is a ton of rawness to this guy, and I want to see him kind of hone his skills and a little bit rein his play a little bit in. I think he's something that has a ton of talent with that size. We'll just have to also see what happens there, because there's a long runway to go there. Emil Guete, I was kind of shocked to still go as high as he did. Really good goal scoring instincts. That's pretty much it when it comes to his game, in my opinion, especially over the course of this QMJHL season. Just constantly disappointed me, but we'll see. The goal scoring is there, just needs to fill out that frame, actually start to become a little bit more of an impactful player, especially at 5-on-5. But I really did like the Anthony Alansamaki pick here at the 6th round. One of the younger players in this draft class, but 6'2", 183 pounds, commit to UConn. I thought he was really underrated in the USHL this year. Has some good activations on him. He's really, he's just really a heads-up player. That's the biggest thing and the biggest compliment I can give to him, is he's always looking to make the next play, always looking to get the puck out of the zone. Another lefty, which again, very curious for this draft with how much lefty depth Anaheim already has. But I think this is something that is a project, but if he does pop, could be just a really versatile, but also bigger defenseman on your bottom pair. On to the last team in the B- tier. We go on to the Anaheim Ducks rivals in the LA Kings, just barely above them. I think for the Kings, they did really well in most of the rounds they selected in this year's class. First, you got Henry Brustovitz. They ended up trading back, getting a little bit more draft capital, which I think worked out for them. At 31st overall, they ended up selecting Henry Brustovitz. And even though right D is a part of a large amount of players in that LA system, I think Brustovitz brings something that they don't have a lot in that system when it comes to the physical traits he has, as well as the goal scoring potential, how he likes to step into the offense while bringing, I think, a pretty balanced defensive game, even if there is some issues here and there. But it's more of a project to me, but still a worthwhile one to take on, especially in the later half of that 2nd round. You got Wojciech Chihar, who is just a two-way stud there. Doesn't really do too much else besides that defensive game, but it's just very relentless forward, brings that energy. We'll have to wait and see if he can actually bring the offense along with that, but at 59th overall, I can see the vision there too. But after this is where I think the Kings made some really interesting picks. You got Christian Epperson at 88th overall. One of the more high-profile overagers, of course, was Michael Misa's line mate in Saginaw throughout a big chunk of this NHL season, or OHL season. You see, in 58 games, 80 points. He was really good in that complimentary role, and that's really what I see Epperson being. I see him being this really solid, competitive, power play, reliable guy on like a 3rd line that's a complement to the centers you already have, especially considering the depth the Kings have at the center position too. I think Epperson's going to have some good players to work with, and if he does work with your best players, he's going to get a pretty good amount of results out of that support role. Also, Petteri Rimpinen in the 5th round. My goodness, I absolutely adore to see this. One of the players I was rooting for the most in this draft class as a shorter goalie, 6 foot, 176 pounds, as an overager. Obviously, some things going against him, but you just cannot go against what he he has done this season throughout everywhere he's played, whether it be the U20, the Liga as a starter in 40 games, a 912 save percentage, a 920 save percentage in 5 games in the playoffs, an unbelievable run at this year's U20 World Juniors for the Finns, a 933 save percentage. He was absolutely elite, absolutely, in my opinion, worthy of a draft pick, especially around this range for LA, and I love them taking this type of bet. I also want to give a shout out to Jan Chavan, who at 6'2", 190 pounds, similar to Chihar, where he's a much more defensive presence. I think as Chavan, the rawness, though, is a bit of an issue, which is why he went a lot later than Chihar, but in the 6th round, all had good habits to work around there, but again, the offense really does need to come up. That showing more of that goal scoring will be a big thing, whether that's he's able to actually transition onto the NHL, but an interesting bet to make. And I did want to give a shout out as well to Will Sharp in the 7th round. He's something that I've come to like quite a bit for Kelowna this year, and he's played for both Lethbridge and Kelowna this season. He's something that I think has pretty good activation, knows when to step up into the play, always looking to create some offense, always looking to use that skating ability, especially to rush up the ice. He's a little bit one-dimensional in that aspect, but he is pretty good at what he does. And I think in the 7th round, if he's able to round out that game, you get an interesting defenseman here to potentially work with. Starting us out in the straight B tier is the Edmonton Oilers. And here's the thing, you won't probably get as much serious NHL talent as a team that might pick in the top 10, for example, like an Anaheim Ducks. But considering what Edmonton had to work with, especially with the lack of picks outside the top 2 rounds, almost every single pick they made, I actually like quite a bit. First up, you have Tommy Lafreniere at 83 overall, which I think is just good value. He is a smaller center, but the intensity, the details in his game, just how much of a mature game he plays already, I was just blown away by how detailed his game was for Kamloops this year. And even though I don't think I really see a high-end score, I could pretty easily see Lafreniere becoming a decent 4th-line player in the future. You also got David Lewandowski in the 4th round. I think also provides some pretty good offense to his game, a little bit lanky, but this is somebody that if he fills out that size could become a pretty decent scorer. Just a raw guy though in general, so a good talent. We'll just have to see if everything else about his game besides that puck carrying and that potential of his passing is able to carry on over. You got Asher Barnett, who I don't know if I would select as high as the 5th round, but around that range I think is pretty understandable. Very mature guy, very good leader, especially on the ice, is just very good with his defensive habits and does love to step into the offense with a shot especially. I don't see much offense out of him if he does round out, but I think could become a decent depth guy or a fantastic AHL player. Daniel Salonen was another overager we saw coming out of Finland as a goaltender, big size, 6'3", and put up some pretty decent numbers, especially at the under 20 this year, a 933 save percentage, a 1.55 goals against average. At that point in the draft in the 6th round, you just take somebody that's good at playing the goal, and Daniel Salonen looks to be pretty good. And I absolutely adored having Aiden Park in the 7th round. I think the second to last selection in the draft, which is just criminal for a player that has the play that Park has demonstrated. Another overager in this class, but my goodness, this guy is just electric when the puck is on his stick. In 55 games in the USHL this year, 33 goals, 66 points. This guy can just dangle you out. He's so clever with his puck handling and how he rushes up the ice. I don't know how much translatability there is, but in the 7th round, man, and the talent is just undeniable and easily worth a draft pick. Next up is the Vancouver Canucks, and I gotta say, I don't typically love their draft classes over the past few years, but they did dang good here. This draft class to me kind of seemed to be a little bit more quality over quantity, but I think for the Canucks that works. First, you got Brayden Coots at 15th overall, who I think is just exactly what Vancouver needs up the middle. Strong, adaptive, and so good with his awareness and creating turnovers and just playing so strong in all 3 zones. He's not the biggest center out there, but again, the shades have been made to a player like Bo Horvat. I absolutely see that comparison. The responsibility in his game, though, while not sacrificing too much offense, I think Coots is going to be a fan favorite. I also absolutely adore the Alexei Medvedev pick, getting him at 47th overall. He was my top ranked goaltender in this class. I wasn't expecting him to go first among the goaltenders in the class, obviously did not. But in Medvedev's case, the size, the maturity, the way he skates, the way he flows around the game, and how he handles pressure especially, that's one of the biggest things I look for goaltenders as they go into the NHL and are facing shot after shot after shot with high competition in front of the net. Medvedev handles that so well, had a great season for London, and especially into the 40s. I mean, Medvedev is an easy pick for me to make. Then I also want to give a shout out to the Kieran Dervin pick. Not somebody that is going to blow anybody away, but I could see him being a pretty good play connector when it's all said and done in the NHL. Nothing that I think is going to, again, be fantastic, but I could see him being just a decent play driving 3rd line forward. We'll see if he actually does play center long term, but a big project to take on that I think has some good and tight skill. Now going on to the next team here, I have the St. Louis Blues. I'm not even going to show you guys the picks all in order because they literally only made 3 picks in this draft, but I think all 3 of them have really interesting potential in that Blues system. Obviously, the big one though is Justin Carbonell going 19th overall to St. Louis. I might be biased because of just how good of a fit I think this is for the Blues. I mean, Carbonell is just perfect for them. The skill, the goal scoring, how good he uses his body in transition. This guy is always looking to advance play and use that body in multiple ways. There is some problems defensively, I will say, but my goodness, at 19th overall, the skill set is absolutely radiant. You also got Mikhail Fyodorov. I pronounced so many names today. I just can't, it's just can't come out of me. Mikhail Fyodorov, who in the MHL, I think has put up some pretty good numbers, nothing exceptional, but whenever I watch him, he's just a very efficient player, and I think also in the 5th round is about the range I would have taken him. You also got Levay Harristam, who is on the precipice of my top 10 goalie list, probably wouldn't have been either 11 or number 12, but in the 6th round, I think also is decent value for this range. Good size, but I have some question marks over the projectability. He can be a little bit flustered at times, and I think that might be a problem for him long term, but in the 6th round, I think it's fine value. Really, though, this class is propped up by Justin Carbonell, who I think will be fantastic in that St. Louis pool, and especially with the system they have, all the forwards they have already, Carbonell's going to be able to really finish on all the playmakers they have around him. Now, this is the last team in the straight B tier, but I think we have a pretty big jump between St. Louis and the Nashville Predators. Even though there were a couple of picks that I might have changed the player they drafted, at the end of the day, I think almost every single player they drafted, if maybe every single one, has, I think, the potential to step into the Preds lineup. You got Brady Martin 5th overall, which, even though I think it is a pretty big reach for the skill ceiling of a player like Martin, he's going to play NHL games, he's going to be a fan favorite, the hitting, the physicality, how good he can be in the dump and chase. He's going to be a great playoff player if the Preds are to get there, and I think a very responsible 3rd line center for them. But you got Cameron Reed in the 21st pick, a high upside defensive swing. I love the possession game he provides, how fun he can be in transition, kind of like a Matthew Schaefer light to me, just brings so much up the ice once the puck is on his stick that really I absolutely adore. Riker Lee at 26th overall, another high upside swing, somebody that started the year super small at like 5'9", has grown to be 6'1", 185 pounds. Lee is just a ton of fun though. With how much he's grown, you can start to see as well his game grow a ton over the course of this USHL season, and undeniable numbers: 31 goals, 68 points, 58 games. He has been a rock star there with his skill in transition, especially being one of the main things. Jacob Rumbach, I love as a 35th overall pick. Tons of talent as a shutdown physical defenseman. 6'6", 209 pounds, skates like the wind. He can do a lot defensively that I just adore. Jack Ivankovic is an interesting one. The Preds do like their smaller goaltenders. A good track record of UC Saros, so we'll see how he does. And I think Ivankovic could be a decent backup in the NHL someday for how competitive he is. And I think that could be a good role for him. I don't think he's a starter. I don't think he's above a player like Saros, but if he's a backup for them, I think he could be decent. I think Alex Huang as well as a 4th rounder. Some pretty interesting talent here as one of the younger defensemen of this class. 6 foot and playing in the QMJHL, put up some pretty good numbers. 40 points in 64 games, and didn't look half bad at the U18 World Juniors either. He's really good up the ice in transition. Really good at using a heads-up game offensively. We'll see how much that carries over, especially as his defensive game, I mean, needs to take some steps, but there's an interesting offensive base to build on there. I think got Daniel Niemanen in the 6th round too, an overager, somebody that didn't go drafted last year, but had a pretty solid Liga season. Also, somebody that I'm not quite sure the projectability, but another swing as a defenseman, as a more offensively gifted guy, and they took a lot of those, with Cameron Reed, of course, being the main one. Starting us out in the B+ tier here, we go on it to the Florida Panthers, and on top of winning back-to-back Stanley Cups, I think this is one of their better draft classes in a while to top it all off. For Florida, they actually drafted a pretty decent amount of skill, I would say, too. Their first selection being in the 4th round, coming from Danish forward Mads Kjonsbæk-Clevo. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but still, as a bigger forward, I think he just brings intense skill with the puck on his stick. He's somebody that didn't put up the most amazing numbers in the Junior 20 this year, but my goodness, when he does have the puck on his stick, when he is in the offensive zone, this guy is such a laser, especially with his skating also being pretty underrated aspect to him. I could see him becoming something, maybe a 3rd line scorer perhaps. Shea Bush, much more of a simple player. You're looking for physicality. You're looking for somebody that will just be an absolute dog on the bone. Commit to Penn State, which is basically the perfect place for him to go to. That's the exact style they want to play. Bush, I think, could become a pretty decent role player on a 4th line. Shamar Moses, I absolutely adore in the 5th round. This is somebody that I think just brings so much potential in bursts, but that's kind of the issue, is that you want to see it come together, especially over the course of a single game. And you also have the inconsistent skating, and I understand why he would end up dropping, but I see a team like Florida, man. I mean, they just got rid of a player like Justin Sordiv. Moses is kind of in the same mold, but I think could be more of an offensive player than a player like Sordiv, for example. But I mean, in 48 points, 61 games for North Bay, I think he's waiting to really break out, and I think he has the potential to do that. Arvid Drott, another one in the 6th round, amazing value. Also kind of like Moses, kind of comes and goes, but Drott with the speed in his game, with the skating. He is such a compact skater. It can blow past opponents where he really wants to, but it's about putting the rest of his game together. Actually slowing the game down has become a bit of a problem for him, but the base of skating is really tantalizing for one of the younger players in this class. And then Igor Midlak, funny name aside, 6'6", 176-pound goaltender. Hey, when he played a few games in the MHL this year, you got a .941 save percentage. Not a lot to go on, but I mean, for what, the last pick of the NHL draft, a Russian goalie who's big, there are worse bets to make. On to another team that I think in a pretty underrated class in general, in the Winnipeg Jets. The big theme for this class especially being skating. First, you got Sasha Boudin in their first pick at 28th overall, one of the most gifted skaters of this draft class with the agile nature of his skating. He can be such a good opponent against physical pressure when he wants to be. The big thing about his game is I just want to see more assertion. I want to see him get more aggressive because there is potential, I think, to become a really decent two-way defenseman. It's just about using that and boosting up that smarts and that pace and processing a bit more. But I think there's potential there with that skating and just how much it's so far ahead, so many defensemen in this class. You got Owen Martin, who brings so much speed and intensity. I guess the big motto when it comes to this class for Winnipeg, not skating necessarily, but just energy and potential with the feet. In Martin's case, this guy looks to be active, looks to be physical, looks to make plays. He's always looking to make something dangerous happen, and that was the course throughout this entire WHL season. Didn't play every single game, but was hovering around a point per game. I just see a 4th line center if he were to make it, but my goodness, a pretty fun one if he is to make it. You got Victor Klingsell, who is a smaller forward as well, but I think this guy, when he gets the puck on a stick, when you get on a man advantage, when you give him some space, a lot of offense to tap into, especially over the course of this season. Good goal scoring wherever he went to. Great in the playoffs as well in the Junior 20, especially in the 5th round. Easy money, 100% by the Jets. I also want to give a shout out to Jacob Cloutier, pretty similar to an Owen Martin, a little bit smaller, so that might limit his upside long term, but super fast. This guy is looking to always attack the defenders that he's going against. Pretty solid forechecker. And as you can see, the goal scoring, not a bad amount. 23 goals in 67 games for Saginaw this year. Obviously playing on a pretty stacked team. Didn't get much of an opportunity, but a 7th round pick for the Jets. For somebody that is as fast as he is, I think there are worse bets to make. Next up, let's go on to the New York Rangers, who having also had a B+ draft here. I didn't think I would be saying that, considering they don't even have a top 40 pick in this year's class, but for what they had to work with, the Rangers actually did pretty good. The 4 picks that I want to talk about the most, Spence, Barnhill, Eriksson, and Zeb Lindgren. First, you got Malcolm Spence, who at 43rd overall, I don't know what he did to teams at the Combine, if he just decided to swear to every single GM he met or something, but 43rd overall is a steal and a half for the Rangers. Malcolm Spence is just so much fun out there with the intensity, with how simple his game is, with the physicality he presents. I think Spence is just going to be a pretty perfect 3rd-line wing, something that just brings a lot of diversity with the attacking game he presents. Not a ton of long-term upside to me, but my goodness, at 43rd overall, yes, just take him. Don't really think much about it. It's a solid pick there. Sean Barnhill at 70th overall, I think is also pretty good value. I have my concerns when the puck gets on his stick because this guy can launch some grenades. It's just kind of a tough position for him to be in at points, but I think Barnhill defensively quiets the game down well, especially around in net, is one of the more physical defensemen out there, and I think especially for a team with the Rangers, that is music to their ears. Mikael Eriksson, Norwegian prospect in this class, one of the younger ones out there at 5'11", 187 pounds, but I love just how skilled this guy is. In the Junior 20, he tore things up. I have my concerns over how this game will adjust once he actually gets to the pro level, but when he does have the puck on his stick, when he does have some space to work with, Eriksson is just such a gifted attacker, and I love the way he plays the game, even if it might not be the most translatable. You got Zeb Lindgren in the 5th round, which I think is also pretty good value. In terms of the skating, that is a massive part of things. He's always looking to activate, always looking to use his skating to get out of the zone. He can kind of rely on it a little bit too much for me, and some of the decision making can be a little bit suspect, but I think as a 5th round pick, a pretty good balanced defender to bring on. We move on now to the B+, Ottawa Senators. Sens fans, rejoice, because for the first time since I think like 2020, I actually like an Ottawa Senators draft class. For one, when you take my boy Logan Hensler, you're automatically good in my book, but especially trading back a couple of spots, gaining the extra third-round pick, going from 21 to 23, and still getting him, I think is pretty great for them, especially when you have a player like Carter Yakimchuk. I explained before, with him being such a more offensive zone defenseman, especially in the power play, with the goal scoring he has, I think it being a major component. You have a player like Logan Hensler, who I think is being so much better in transition, so much better at getting the puck out of his zone, and really keeping the game quiet in his own end, which I think is going to be important for a Sens team that needs more of that on their right side of the defense. You got Blake Vanek in the third round. I'm kind of iffy on him personally. He's probably my least favorite pick of the bunch, but for how young he is, I think he's a pretty refined player, but I think needs to take some major steps still, coming from United States High School League. You got Lucas Beckman coming in at the fourth round. One of the better goaltenders, I would say, in the draft, and around this range, I can understand it. A decent size and pretty young for this class. My big concern is the maturity and how it seems like his game is quite raw at this stage, especially with his decision making. But again, he's one of the younger players in this class, and still pretty great numbers in the QMJHL this year, and especially the World Juniors, so I don't hate the bet there. Dmitry Isayev was probably the biggest surprise of this class for the Sens. 5'9", 148 pounds, one of the smallest players in this class, especially when it comes to the pounds per height ratio, and they selected him. I mean, good on him. He's super fun, super creative. Not really a Sens pick to me. I don't know what random scout in that staff got their say finally, but Isayev's a pretty fun bet. We'll see if he ends up working out. Bruno Izan, of course, one of my favorites in this class. He is so much fun to watch with the goal scoring, with the finishing. I mean, this guy is one of the better finishers, I would say, in this class. Yes, he is an overager, but he went from the Alps Hockey League this year to the USHL and was one of the best, I would say the top 5 best producers, best offensive players in the USHL this year. And I get it, there's a risk to the defensive game to him, but when he is in the offensive zone, he will find the space to create the scoring chance and score on that scoring chance, and I cannot wait to see him in Wisconsin this fall. Then the last pick is Andrei Trofinomov, who I think is interesting as a 7th rounder, a pretty underrated bet in the Russian junior leagues. 26 games in the MHL this year, 929 save percentage. When in doubt, man, in the 7th round, take a Russian goalie who puts up great statistics, and more likely than not, you're going to be getting a pretty good prospect. So we'll see once again with this guy. Now let's move on to another big class in this year's draft, in the Chicago Blackhawks. Still in the B+ range. I thought they did pretty well for themselves overall. Nothing that I think is a unbelievable pick, but a lot of good value all around. Anton Frindell at 3rd. Even though I wouldn't have selected him at this spot, I still think he fits that Chicago top 6 pretty well, with the physical play, the strength on his skates, and of course the goal scoring that I think is going to be a massive component of that power play going forward. I think he'll fit quite well. Then we go into the later first round picks in Vaclav Nestor-Sil and Mason West. And I know there's been a lot of doubts about both of these guys by a lot of Blackhawks fans I'm seeing, but I don't really think you guys should, because this is exactly what the Blackhawks needed more of on the wings. 2 guys that are huge, but also have so much skill on top of that to layer their game. Nestor Sil is just a monster, 6'6" out there, but this guy can fly up the ice. He loves to make the big highlight reel move, loves to get in front of the net and just make something crazy happen. He's just so much fun to watch. I would recommend go watch a Lumberjacks game this last year. This guy is just so much fun to watch, and I think we'll get a lot more production as his game refines a bit more. Mason West is also a huge swing, one of the youngest players in this draft, and of course all the discussions about him being a high school quarterback. If he does choose hockey, I think that'll be the right decision, because he's one heck of a hockey player. 6'6", 218 pounds, and I think more than Nestor Sil. Even though West is still extremely raw, he knows how to use his body, especially along the boards, to progress play up the ice. I think he's a really exceptional transition player and a great skater for his size. I would say Nestor Sil is a solid skater for his size. West is great as a 6'6" wing. I see West having so much potential, and if West even taps into like 50% of it, he's a middle 6 winger automatically. After that, Nathan Beam in the 3rd round. I don't really like him too much. I think he's great at goal scoring, and that's pretty much it, but in the 66th spot, I don't think it's the end of the world. I did like the bet on Julius Sumpf at the 98th position. Pretty big overager in the QMJHL, but we talk a lot about Caleb Noye and how good he was in the QMJHL this season. I thought Sumpf was really good at starting a lot of those transitions and being kind of the goal scorer in a lot of cases to a player like Noye. Was great in the QMJHL playoffs too, great at this year's World Juniors for Germany. Not a bad bet, in my opinion, to make either. On to our last team in the B+ tier, we go on to the San Jose Sharks. Now, I gotta be honest, they were so close to being an A- for me, but there was a couple picks that I was a little more iffy on. Michael Misa was not one of those picks, spoiler alert. Second overall, to me, the best prospect of this class, getting with that second overall position, that completes their forward group long term. The duo of him and Chernyshov back together, everything about it, I absolutely adore. Joshua Ravensbergen, not as much for me personally. You guys know, not even close to my #1 goalie of this class. I ranked him #4 behind Medvedev, then Andrianov, and then Semyon Frolov. But in Ravensbergen's case, I think he's solid with his size. I just have some concerns about how he really handles pressure, those high-intense situations. There will be a lot of development runway for him, I'm sure, but I especially when you already have Yaroslav Askarov in the pool, goaltending wasn't exactly a priority for me, but I can still understand wanting to have some more depth there. You go on to Simon Wang at the 33rd position, and it's not who I would have selected again, but I think in Wang's case, he's somebody that just is one of the rawest players of this class, but also has some pretty big potential with the unbelievable skating for his size, for just how much of a physical product I think he could become. 223 pounds, just unbelievable how big this guy is already. A lot of runway and a massive project. I don't know if it's one I would have taken on if I'm San Jose, but worse bets to make. Wang is just so much fun, and if he does turn out, could be a very interesting project. I really loved Cole McKinney, 53rd overall. Fantastic pick to get outside the 50s. This guy I just see as your ideal bottom 6 center of the future. So intense on the puck, such a good forechecker with his speed. This guy plays such a simple, balanced, but refined game already. He is just going to be such a good depth centerman for San Jose, and I think the perfect fourth line center behind Celebrini, Misa, and I'm always forgetting his name. The Swedish centerman they drafted in the first round a couple years ago. I've talked about so many names, you guys. I'm so sorry, but you know who I'm talking about. And then the last pick that I thought was pretty good was Teddy Mutrin in the 3rd round, 95th overall. He had some good space to him, a pretty good shot to him too, and you see in the USHL this year, 17 goals, 30 points in 47 games for the Chicago Steel. I think there's a lot to work on, a lot of refinements, and a lot of ability getting to the net that I think needs improvement, but a good base to build on there, and the goal scoring, the shot is pretty high end. Starting us out in the A- tier, I also, like the Ottawa Senators, wouldn't have expected the Boston Bruins to be this high for a long time, but here they are, surprising the heck out of me. Really, most of this comes down to the James Hagens selection. Getting that 7th overall is just a fantastic pick in all respects. The type of talent that Hagens is, the playmaking, the vision, the creativity, the transition ability, Hagens is just an elite talent. Getting him a little bit stronger on top of that physicality that I think he already has a little bit more of that has been showing itself in the second half of the season for BC, I think will be important, but a fantastic bet, and to me, a future 1C in this league. William Moore was their next selection at 51st overall. I'm not quite as high on Moore. I think he'll round out as a pretty decent 4th line center. The problem is he's more of a finisher to me, more of a decent goal scorer, rather than somebody that is this competitive rush offense type of guy. I think once the cycle is created, once the offense is settled in, he's good at getting the play finished, but outside of that, I don't quite see as much in his game. We'll see what happens, but I think we'll round it as more of a 4th line for them. Liam Pettersson was a bit of a interesting pick in the top 2 rounds. Not sure I would have gone for that. I think he's a pretty smooth defenseman, pretty calculated guy all around. I just don't quite see enough talent, especially for his size, to quite get them there. I don't think he's going to be a defenseman by any means, so we'll have to wait and see on that. Cooper Simpson, I did like the bet around this range. It was kind of where I was expecting Cooper Simpson to go. High skill, high motor. This guy is just unbelievable when it comes to his pace, especially in the high school league this year. You see 83 points in 31 games, just torturing these children out there. It was insane to watch. But I think Simpson has a lot of runway to go because he's still very raw, but a lot to work on that I'm pretty excited about. On to another team in the A- tier. Here is where the Detroit Red Wings end up finding themselves. And I just like this pool quite a bit, especially their first few picks. You got Carter Bear at 13th overall, which is exactly the range where I think he should be going. Heavy intensity, but great goal scoring as a layer on top of that. He's a fantastic finisher, but also isn't afraid to be a part of the forecheck, be a part of the physicality. He is a smaller forward, not intense height, but my goodness, the traits and the balance in Bear's game is just hard to pass up on. At 13th is a great pick. Eddie Genborg, much more of a simple, just pure, I'm going to hit you, I'm going to make it physical. He's something that I could see rounding out as a pretty decent 4th line player in the NHL, and in the Red Wings system, they love their Swedes. Genborg, I think, could fit pretty well. Michael Brodel was an interesting one to see go as high as he did, but I'm pleasantly surprised. He was one of my more underrated goalies in my top 10, and you can see in the 75 overall range, I think he's pretty solid at that spot. 6'5", 198 pounds, Solvac goalie. He's somebody that at points wasn't amazing for Tri-City, but in the USHL, save percentage is a little bit all over the place. So an 899 actually wasn't too bad for their system, but was pretty good at the U18 Worlds. He's somebody that I like quite a bit with how smooth he collects himself, how good he is with his vision, and just how much he uses that body to his advantage. So especially in the top 75, I think it's quite solid. Brent Sullivan commits to University of Wisconsin. Because of that, of course, I know quite a bit about him, but I like him a ton. This guy is really calculated, very mature for his offense, is playing in the USHS. So a lot of stuff that we'll need to transition over, but I love the goal scoring instincts. I love just how calculated he is with his positioning. We'll see what happens, but in the 4th round, I think a very fun bet to make, especially as a potential power play guy in the future. And then Michael Sverchek at the 119th overall spot. This was somebody that I was expecting to drop, maybe even a little bit more than this, but my goodness, what he was able to do this year in the SHL, especially in the playoffs, getting some pretty good time on ice for somebody as young as he was, which was pretty cool to see. The big thing is explosiveness, energy, intensity. This guy is willing to do everything out there to will his team to a win. With the skill on top of that too, especially against physical competition. He's a smaller player, yes, but I think he does pretty good in those high pressure situations. So for a player like him, I wouldn't be surprised if just that mindset and the way he plays gets him an NHL job someday. And for the last team in my A- tier, this is where I have the Philadelphia Flyers, who, as you can see, were very quality over quantity, having 6 picks within the first 2 rounds and then 3 picks afterwards, which I find pretty funny. Of course, to me, this class is going to be highlighted by Porter Martone, an excellent talent to get at 6th overall. He is somebody that is just so good in transition. The skill is radiant, and I think Philly is the exact type of place where they can mold him into the power forward I think he has the potential to be. He has physicality in his game, but I want to see it realized in every single shift with the effort that I know is in him, but it doesn't always get fully taken out. We'll see what happens, but at 6th overall, great value there. Jack Nesbitt, I'm not as big of a fan on. He was in my 40s in my draft rankings, and I'll say this, he uses physicality well, even though I want to see him use a little bit more like a Brady Martin. The energy is kind of an issue. I think in Nesbitt's case, he has some good goal-scoring streaks to him. I think he's very opportunistic in finding lanes and finding where the offense is coming from. My big problem still, though, is the skating, the pace, and how that's going to translate. I think, again, he will play NHL games. He'll be a solid pro, be, I think, a good bottom 6, likely, though, 4th line center to me. But I just don't quite see 12th overall potential. Still something that'll be a fan favorite in Philly, but again, I just kind of fail to see the long-term upside. We'll just have to wait and see, though, if the Flyers coaching staff can get his skating a little bit better, then that'll really be the main difference there. Then in the 2nd round, you got Carter Amico, a 6'6", 231-pound dude. Unfortunately, missed a lot of this season due to injury, but I think rounds out as a very solid bottom pair defenseman, as a right shot that's pretty valuable to see. I don't know if 38th overall would have been my place to take him, but I mean, I think he'll round it into a pretty solid defenseman eventually. You got Jack Murtagh as well, a couple of picks later at 40th overall. He's somebody I like a ton with the goal-scoring instincts he has, how good he can be in transition, and around the net, he has some sneaky physicality to him. He isn't afraid to go against pressure and try to use that body that's a little bit slight but bigger in height to his advantage. I still want to see him use more physicality. I want to see him get even more intense because I think there are times where he can be a great power forward, but isn't quite at that level, kind of like a Porter Martone, honestly, but a good project to take on. Shane Van Saggy, unbelievable value at 40th overall. He was somebody inside my top 25. If you wanted to go for a Nesbitt type of guy, Van Saggy is that, just kind of on the wing. He has some skating concerns, sure, but Van Saggy is just unbelievably relentless and just so good when it comes to just attacking defenders, just making their lives so hellish. It's unbelievable to watch just how good of an attacker this guy is, how good he is at creating pressure and turnovers through his attacking skill, and we'll see what ends up happening, but I think just as a solid 3rd line forechecker, Van Saggy is going to play that role perfectly. Matthew Guard at 57th overall, he's super big, has a little bit of a slight frame considering that size, but I think also is a pretty decent forechecker. He's pretty smart in the way he moves and how he gets up the ice. I think Guard has very limited offensive upside, kind of like a Nesbitt, more of a 4th line center. I would be more optimistic in Nesbitt reaching that potential than a Matthew Guard, but still pretty similar players, I would say. Then I wanted to also shout out one of their later picks in Max Westergaard. Getting me in the 5th round, I think, is exceptional value. One of the youngest players in this draft class, but this guy is just fast. This guy is relentless with his pace and just goes up and down the ice so consistently well. I just love how much he attacks the game, how much he's willing to put himself out there. Not the biggest forward by any means, but a nice 5th round swing. On to the Washington Capitals. Now we get into the straight A tier, and Washington puts a interesting question out there. Can you be one of the biggest winners in the draft by making, in my opinion, only 2 good but unbelievable picks? Well, I think you're getting the answer now. They only made 2 picks that I think will be future NHLers, but they were such good picks with such good value that I just can't have Washington any lower than this. First, you got Lyndon Lakovic at 27th overall, which is just, with his potential, an unbelievable type of talent to bring onto the roster. He just has so much skill in transition. This guy can just dangle you in so many different directions and make you look like Bambi out there if you really got badly hurt by him. He just can be such a deadly player when the puck is on his stick. There is the concerns over the effort level and especially the defensive game where it can sometimes coast a little bit more than you'd want, but Washington has a reoccurring theme of taking these skillful players and getting the most out of them in their franchise. Lakovic, I'm sure, can be another one just like that. And then you got Milton Gastrin, who's kind of a different story, I would say. Similarly, there are times where you want to see maybe a little bit more out of him, but I think Gastrin can round out a lot more as just this lethal middle six, wing or centerman. The forechecking is brilliant with him. I think the speed is underrated for his size, but he's physical, he's intense, and especially the deking ability in transition too could be pretty good with Gastrin as well. So to get this type of guy at 37 when I had him in my first round pretty confidently is a fantastic pick. I see him being a solid middle six center, and Lakovic with top 6 potential too at 27. You'll take that every single day of the week. But let's go into a team that also had some pretty good picks by themselves and had a ton of quantity of good picks to talk about in the Calgary Flames. Now, Flames fans, I think you guys should get pretty excited because these last 2 drafts have been simply phenomenal by this Calgary scouting staff. First, you got Cole Reschny at 18th overall, which is around the range I would have taken him, but I just adore this kid and the way he plays. He's a smaller center, but he is relentless with his pace, the efficiency in his passing, how good he is with his creativity. There is just so much to like here. If he was like 2 inches taller, this guy would be a top 10 pick to me definitively. Like, without even a question, this guy would be. So good for Victoria this year. Such a good leader. I just adore this guy, and especially with how unbelievable he was in the WHL playoffs, I think we can put the issues of him being a smaller center aside. He can handle pressure pretty well and will be an excellent player for North Dakota this upcoming fall. Then you got Cullen Potter, who I ranked 10th in this class at 32nd overall. And in Potter's case, just like Reschny, I can see the issues and why he could end up slipping just a little bit. In Potter's case, also another forward as a center that is a little bit smaller. He might end up playing wing long term, but I thought he was solid at the center position for Arizona State. Put up some decent face-off numbers considering his strength of competition. And I think in Potter's case, the best skater in terms of the forwards in this class. The speed, the agility, the sharp edges when he's going up the ice are just so deceiving, so deceptive. Even though he didn't put up amazing numbers in Arizona State this year, this guy just goes. He puts up so much effort on and off the puck. And even though I want to see him add some more muscle, that's really the biggest problem I have against him. And sometimes the defensive positioning could be a little bit off maybe sometimes, but the strength is the big thing I want to see him improve upon. And if he does by like 15 pounds or so, this guy I think could be a dog, and a great one alongside Reschny too. Next pick, of course, I think is a good one. Theo Stockselius, 54th overall. They didn't add too much size down the middle with the Reschny and Potter picks. Well, they go ahead and get Stockselius, who is a stocky, lanky dude, 6'3", but 96 pounds. This is somebody that has grown so much over the course of this season with his details, and that will be the biggest issue, I think, for him is the rawness and how much he actually plays an NHL style game. But I think in Stockselius' case, the in-tight skill in those tight moments, in those pressure times when he does get pressured against bigger opponents, he's so good at protecting the puck, so good at making that quick pass or that quick shot. His goal scoring instincts are pretty good as well. I think in Stockselius' case, the sky is the limit for this dude, but of course a pretty rangy guy like a Samuel Hanzik, who they drafted recently, to try to mold into somebody pretty good at the NHL level. Then I also want to give a shout out to Maceo Phillips, who I don't think will be a great defenseman, but I think he'll play a lot of NHL minutes someday. 6'6", 234 pounds. It's kind of like the budget Carter Amico, who we talked about earlier, is very physical, very much a defenseman prone to a lot of bad penalties, but is decent defensively. And that's what Phillips is. He's looking to make a big hit. He's looking to get under your skin. He's going to be a fan favorite if he plays some minutes, because kind of reminds me actually a little bit of a Mark Stone now that I think, not a Mark Stone. You know what I'm talking about. Was it Mike Stone? Oh my gosh. Flames defenseman from a few years back named Stone. That type of play, that type of get under your skin type of physicality, Phillips brings that. Yeah, I remembered his name now, kind of like Michael Stone, so there you go. But now we get into the final 3 teams to grade, and the 3 teams that to me were A pluses in this draft class. Let's go on to the Montreal Canadiens. Now, for one, it's not the biggest factor, but I am also counting trades slightly into this ranking. So the fact that Montreal, I think for 16, 17, and of course another player coming back for Noah Dobson is a pretty massive win just by itself. I think at that range, you could have gotten some good players, but Noah Dobson is, I think, a pretty huge add for that Habs defense. But even outside of that, the players that they drafted, there was just so much fun added to this Habs prospect pool. I just absolutely adore it, man. First, you got Alexander Surovsky, which if we're just talking talent alone, is a first rounder in this year's class. I have my concerns over how consistent of a product he is, how much muscle there is, because my goodness, this guy will need to add some pounds for that game to work, especially for how aggressive he is physically. But the more I talk about him with other people that have also watched him, the more I feel like he's more of a top 50 guy for me rather than the 60s like I initially ranked him. The more I watch, the more I know, the more I love about Alexander Surovsky, and especially at 34th overall. He's a swing, yes, but if he does pop, my goodness, you are getting one heck of a driver here of play. I also want to talk about Hayden Papanikis, who I also love at the very nice position at 69th overall. He was somebody I ranked inside the top 50 for this class. 6'5", 203-pound centerman. I love the pace. I love the in-tight skill when he is pressured. He can just bring out so many different moves on you. One of the rarer prospects of this class, I would say, especially in his range, but he's something that I love the goal-scoring instincts. I love how much he pushes himself to get better and better. The thing is, he kind of reminds me, though, of a little bit like a Curry Doc, if you were to make it, where there's some injury history, there's some concerns there with how consistent of a player he is, but Papanikis, man, I mean, he could, if Papanikis pops, he could be a pretty fun player on top of that. Again, we're talking about players that could pop. Bryce Pickford is one heck of a player to bring onto the pool, too. At the 81st overall selection, this is probably where I would have had him if I went in my rankings beyond the top 75, for example. Pickford is just a wild player. My goodness, as an overager, this guy has exploded over the last couple of seasons, going from Seattle to this year, the Medicine Hat Tigers. In 48 games, 20 goals, 45 points. The name of the game when it comes to Pickford is the aggression. This guy is willing to do everything in the offensive zone to create goals. This guy will have an absolute bomb from the point, but also just have so much aggression with his transition ability and his skating and what he puts himself out there to be. I think in Pickford's case, he's a pretty big boomer bust prospect, but my goodness, on the defensive side, he is a fun player, and especially when it comes to the micro stats, from what I've seen, Pickford is just a beast from the WHL this year, so I think there's a high potential in that pick, too. Arseny Radkov was one that I was pretty shocked to see. 6'4" goaltender, young guy as well with an August birth date. Admittedly, I have not watched him this season, but you go in the MHL this year, you put him in 918 save percentage, not too bad. Get a, not Russian goalie, but playing in the MHL, putting up some pretty good numbers. Again, not a bad bet to make. Then you go into LJ Mooney, 4th rounder, and my goodness, I just need to see an LJ Mooney, Cole Caulfield pair and line in the future. 5'7", 157 pounds. Of course, the big thing is the size, but my goodness, Mooney can be physical. He can lay out some big hits. He was hitting Brady Murka at the U18s this year. This guy is a competitive dog. I have heard so much about LJ Mooney is just such a relentless competitor. This guy wants to get better. He wants to be an elite player. And with the skills that he has, there is so much to like about it. The vision, the creativity, and how he puts himself against physical pressure. He's not a soft player by any means. The big issue, though, will be adding strength, adding more muscle to make that successful at the next level. But as of right now, he's a pretty successful player himself. And then we go into the last player I want to mention here in Carlos Handel, who I think in the 6th round is a pretty solid bet too. Nothing too excited to me in his game for me, but I think he's just a compact defenseman, skates pretty well for his size, and I think does pretty well with his habits defensively. Nothing, again, that's amazing or anything, but I think he's a pretty decent, more two-way defenseman there. And in the 6th round, why not? On to the team that I think had the second best draft class in the NHL draft this year. We go on to, yet again, the Carolina Hurricanes. They outdid themselves in terms of the Canes draft stereotypes this year, but I mean, I can't really forget about the results. At the end of the day, as the draft was going, every time the Canes were up, I'm like, wait, that guy was still available? Wait, that guy was still on the board? How'd the Hurricanes do it again? and that's pretty much how it happens. Starting out the draft at 41st overall, you got Semyon Frolov, who to me was the third best goaltender of this draft, but between him, Medvedev, and Andrianov, I don't think there was a massive difference. So to give him at 41, I think it's pretty good value. 6'3", 203 pounds. If this guy can get a little bit more athletic, I think this guy can just be unbelievable. Not as good MHL stats as some of the other players of his age, but I think the potential is sky high with him. Charlie Serrato, my goat. You guys know how much I love this guy as a double overager. Yes, I know he's not a household name or anything, but this guy took massive leaps. We're talking massive steps over the past couple of seasons, going from a great USHLer to an undeniable force for Penn State. One of the biggest reasons why they turned around their season this last year and were in the Frozen Four, Charlie Serrato is one of the biggest ones. In transition, this guy is a wizard. So many creative plays, so much high-octane offense. Charlie Serrato is always engaged, but not even just offensively. This guy is so detailed in his overall game, creating turnovers and then using that speed to rush up the ice. My big concern maybe is just how much that skill will take him, how much of that skill as a more skillful forward, is it high end enough to get him into a top 6 spot, but I could pretty easily see Serrato as a bottom 6 center with the smarts that he provides and just how much he's grown over the past couple of years. Then you got Ivan Ryabkin at 62nd overall, and I was expecting Ryabkin to fall a little bit, even a little bit more than this, honestly. I don't think he should have in terms of the potential, but of course there's all the conversations about him potentially having a bad combine. That's not confirmed, but it's been widely reported. In Ryabkin's case, of course, to me, at least the effort level, the consistency this year in the USHL was just not there, but the goal scoring, when there is the man advantage, Ryabkin is a deadly offensive force. So we'll have to wait and see if he develops, but at 62nd overall, there's really no ifs and buts about it. It's just good value at that spot. Then you got Kurban Limatov, another great value Russian, 67th overall. I mean, I think in Ryabkin's case, there might be some conversations about the translatability. Limatov is just a translatable defenseman. I think he's going to be easily a bottom pair defenseman someday with that size, with that skating ability, for how smart he is as a bigger defenseman. Limatov, I think, just translates especially well to be your 5th defenseman in the lineup and will play a ton of minutes for the Canes and be a fan favorite. And then you got Philip freaking Ekberg, 221st overall. For the World Junior U18 MVP is just ridiculous. I mean, Ekberg, I was going back and forth on in terms of my evaluation, especially my rankings on where to put him. He's a smaller forward, but just at the end of the day, the skill on display in transition, how good he is at weaponizing and maximizing his chances offensively. In the OHL, just did not get a lot of time on ice, did not get a lot of opportunity, but I think deserved a lot of it. And in the U18s, with the opportunity he got, you see what he was capable of. 18 points in 7 games, undeniable player, unbelievably consistent. The skill set is radiant. It's just on him to fully realize it. And a 7th round pick, yeah, that talent is something I would bet on. To the surprise of probably nobody watching this video, coming in at the #1 position, and to me, the team that won the NHL draft the most, and to me had the best draft all around, was in fact the New York Islanders. Of course, a big reason why this draft was so good for them was the 1st overall pick in Matthew Schaefer. But Schaefer aside, of course, you have the big Noah Dobson deal, which allowed the Islanders to get the 16th and 17th overall selections. I think even though Dobson, I would have liked a little bit more in the trade, the time had come, and I think the Islanders needed to go in a much younger direction, especially with how few teams out there are going in a true rebuilding direction. I felt like a team like the Islanders had an opportunity to strike while the iron is hot, make themselves a contender for Gavin McKenna, especially next year, and I think they certainly have. Matthew Schaefer, though, is going to be a transformative defenseman and a solid pick at 1st overall. Then you got Victor Eklund at 16, and this is when I started to realize this might be a generational draft for this Islanders team. Victor Eklund is a dog I don't think should have been drafted outside the top 5. This guy is relentless, one of the best board battle winners I've seen in the draft in a long time, and I know he's 5'11", 170 pounds, but this guy is an absolute beast, an absolute dog on the puck. So good at getting to the net and making it successful. With his goal scoring streak, with how good he is getting to the net, he just plays such a successful, such a translatable NHL game to me. He might not be true 80-point upside type of player, but as your complimentary first-line wing, Eklund to me is going to be dynamic in that role. Then you got Krishan Aitchison at 17, and you're talking about electricity and physicality behind a Matthew Schaefer. Aitchison is going to be amazing there too. I think he has decent upside, though obviously nothing compares to a Matthew Schaefer in that way, but the physicality, the goal scoring, the clutchness in overtime, Aitchison is going to be a fan favorite. Daniil Prokhorov at 42nd overall, I would say a bigger bet to make than a Zarovsky, just because I think in Prokhorov's case, a lot more needs to go right for it to all work. But he's a huge guy, 6'6", 218 pounds, and on the power play, this guy can absolutely rip in goals. That's, to me, at the end of the day, what Prokhorov's value will be. I don't see too much outside of that, but again, if you can get him a good center, a good playmaking guy behind him that can play, drive, and get him the puck in front of the net, Prokhorov will make little mistakes. Then Luca Romano, you got a 74th overall, which I think is very fair territory for Romano to get drafted. Even though I have my concerns over how projectable his game is, for his style, he's super hard-edged, he's great in transition, and that physicality, that energy that he plays with, I think is really appreciated. It'll still be a long shot to make it, but if he does make it, I think could be a decent bottom six center. And of course, Luca Romano, I mean, great Italian-sounding name right there to bring onto the island. You also got Tomasz Politin, who I think is going to be a very interesting pick at 106. Went a lot later than I was expecting, considering his physical and scoring blend. But you can see in the U20s, 13 goals, 20 points in 25 games. Very raw project, but similar to a Prokhorov. You get him the puck, he's barely going to make many mistakes with it. Then you got Sam Larola in the 5th round. He's a bit of an interesting one. I don't know if he's an overager or not, but September birthday. 6'1", 192 pounds. He's something that played, I thought, pretty exceptional for Fargo this last year. 41 points in 57 games. Of course, a commit to North Dakota. I like how active he is, and I think some of that can be a bit of an issue. I want to see him quiet his game down a bit, but I like the physicality that he provides. I like how good he can be in transition, activating when he needs to, so we'll see what happens there. Burke Hood was maybe the biggest surprise of this class, but also maybe not, because he's somebody that I thought was pretty solid in the second half for Vancouver. 6'4", 203 pounds, and it's a six rounder. I think he could go worse. I mean, a 910 save percentage in the WHL this year. Didn't have the greatest playoffs altogether, but I think there is potential to be a potential backup someday. And then you got Jacob Kaznika, who at the 7th round position, I mean, this is kind of where I was expecting him to go, but I think it's just good value at this spot. Super young for this draft, but this guy is just motor all day, every day. And especially around the net, loves to bang and crash, loves to get the nasty goals, loves to make things difficult around the net for defenders. He's not very big, and that's the kind of the problem with the way he plays the game, but I don't know. The 7th round, you just take some of the best players you can get, and he's one of the best players available around that range. So to me, I look at everything here, and I just think the Islanders absolutely killed it. The depth in every position, getting forwards and defense and goaltending. Really, the only thing that maybe is missing is the center position, but I think for the Islanders, there's a lot of time to fill it up, especially since they already have a player like Cal Ritchie in the system too, who will be pretty good for them, and there's always next year as they look to fully rebuild. So for me, a transformative draft for the Islanders, the exact direction I wanted to see this team go in. I'm glad they finally realized it and have done pretty well with pretty much every single pick they had. But ladies and gentlemen, I have been recording for 2 hours and 6 minutes, so I'm going to get the heck out of here and edit this video. Thank you so much for watching today. If you enjoyed the grades and enjoyed the draft breakdowns, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit that notification bell. I might be doing a draft steal video later on, so keep an eye out for that if you will. But of course, if you hit the notification bell, you'll be notified when that comes out. I want to go in the comments down below, where would you rank your favorite team? What grade would you give their draft? What do you think of their draft picks? And who do you think had the best and worst draft class out of everybody today? Let me know your thoughts down below. Of course, you know, with all the hockey fans you guys know online to get the thoughts on their draft classes out there. And click on this card for all of my 2025 draft content wrapped up in a nice little bow in one playlist. I will see you guys in the next one. Make sure you have a fantastic hockey day, and goodbye.